Hey guys. Tonight, you find yourself standing beside the Nile at dusk. The air tastes of dust and river water, thick and heavy, like someone boiled sunlight into the air. The banks shimmer gold and brown, reeds swaying in the slow breath of evening. You can hear insects buzzing, sandals scraping, and a distant splash as someone hauls a net through the shallows. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. The smell hits next. Fish left too long in baskets, onions sweet and sour in the heat, and the faint bitterness of beer gone flat. A cluster of mud brick houses crouch near the water, smoke rising thin and grey from clay ovens. Inside, people sit cross-legged on reed mats, chewing in silence. You hear the crunch of coarse bread, the slosh of beer thick enough to chew, and a low grunt that probably means good enough. Soon, we'll explore the kitchens of the ancient world, their struggles, their small triumphs, their eternal war against heat, insects, and scarcity. You'll taste bread baked with sand, smell beer that fizzed itself rotten, and meet people who believed onions were divine currency. Ancient Egypt looked like paradise from afar until you had to eat there. So settle back, breathe slowly, and let the desert air wrap around you. The night hums softly above the Nile, carrying the scent of barley and ash. The stars are bright, but the kitchens are dim, and somewhere in that glow of clay and smoke, dinner is burning again. The first thing you notice is the rhythm of the river. It breathes, swells, retreats. The Nile decides everything. When people eat, when they plant, when they pray. You hear the soft slap of water against a wooden boat, carrying baskets of barley. The air smells like wet earth and smoke from cooking fires. And though it looks peaceful, everyone knows this calm can change overnight. A failed flood means famine. A generous one means survival. Either way, the Nile always takes its share. You walk along the edge of the fields, where men stoop with sickles, slicing through golden stalks. Their hands are blistered, their backs burnt by the sun. The soil, rich and black, clings to their ankles like ink. They joke about bread as if it were treasure, because it is. You can almost taste the dryness of their laughter, a joke too old to still be funny. Even in harvest, hunger feels close. The wind carries dust and chaff, coating your lips with grit. You can smell the faint sweetness of grain fermenting in baskets left to dry. Each household will store enough to last through the dry months. Or try to. Rats will eat some. Mold will eat some. The rest will taste like soil and sweat. Still, people will bow their heads and give thanks because gratitude was easier than complaining to gods who never listened. As you watch, the river shimmers in the heat, bending like a serpent. You remember that every bit of food here, every onion, every fish, every crumb of bread, starts and ends with this water. People worship it, fear it, talk to it as if it were alive. The Nile, in truth, is the most powerful stomach in Egypt. It feeds everyone, and yet no one is ever full. You pass by a farmer kneeling in prayer beside a clay pot filled with water. He dips his fingers in and touches his forehead. To him, this isn't just a ritual, it's insurance. He asks the river not to forget him this year. You imagine his whisper mixing with 1,000 others, carried downstream toward temples lined with stone gods who never get hungry because they're always being fed. Everywhere you look, there's life bound by repetition. Plant, harvest, grind, bake, pray, repeat. You hear the grinding stones rasping in the distance, the heartbeat of a civilization powered by human hands. It's hypnotic, almost beautiful. But you can sense the exhaustion behind it, the quiet panic that food is never quite enough, that the river might not rise next year, that everything depends on a rhythm no one controls. You look closer at the farmer's feet. The cracks in their skin are filled with black mud. Their tools are simple, dull, repaired too many times. They talk about crops like gamblers talk about luck. You can tell that food here isn't comfort. It's a bet with the earth. One that Egypt sometimes wins and often loses. The riverbank hums with insects. You hear frogs croaking from the reeds, warning of nightfall. Soon, the workers will go home with baskets half full, muttering small prayers to Happy, the god of the flood. The scent of sweat and smoke follows them, clinging to their linen clothes. In the distance, a child laughs. The sound of someone too young to understand what hunger feels like. You walk behind them into the village. Clay walls baked by the sun glow orange under the dying light. A woman squats near a hearth, blowing air into a pot of boiling lentils. You smell smoke, bitter and heavy. Inside her hut, the air is thick, a mixture of ash, onions, and damp fabric. She stirs slowly, muttering about the price of grain. Even the gods, she says, must be tired of eating the same thing every day. The truth of Egypt's abundance is an illusion. The Nile gives, yes, but only to those who can take. Priests and officials eat the finest wheat. Laborers settle for scraps of barley. And though the fields stretch endlessly toward the horizon, most people spend their lives one meal away from hunger. That was Egypt's secret. Paradise for the powerful, and a slow grind for everyone else. A breeze moves through the reeds, cool and damp. You close your eyes, feeling the weight of that truth. The land looks eternal, but survival here is fragile. You realize why the people feared the Nile almost as much as they revered it. Too much water, and everything rots. Too little, and everything dies. Either way, it's the same ending. Empty plates, empty hands, and prayers whispered to the current. You hear the faint echo of oars dipping into water again. Someone is rowing downstream with baskets of grain. You imagine the rhythmic splash fading into the dark, like a heartbeat you can't quite catch. That's how Egypt lived. One pulse from the river to the next, never certain if tomorrow would feed them or starve them. The smell of fresh bread should make you hungry. Here, it doesn't. It's sour, heavy, and faintly metallic. The kind of bread that grinds your teeth more than it fills your stomach. You sit near a small clay oven, feeling the dry heat on your face. A woman pulls out a loaf with a stick, the crust blackened, the air thick with smoke. This is not the soft bread you know. This bread is survival turned solid. You watch her break the loaf with both hands, and you hear the crunch, not crispness, but grit. Sand is everywhere, in the flour, in the fire, in her lungs. The stones used to grind the grain leave tiny bits of quartz behind, mixed into every bite. You chew and feel your teeth ache. Ancient Egyptians lost molars before their 30s, and now you understand why. Each meal was a slow battle against erosion. The woman doesn't seem to notice. She eats in silence, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her child sits beside her, gnawing at a piece of crust like it's a prize. Bread was sacred here, even bad bread. You could insult a man's family, but never his loaf. Priests offered it to gods. Kings stored it in tombs, and peasants built their entire day around earning it. The taste didn't matter. The ritual did. The oven crackles again. You can see the firelight painting the walls orange. The woman sprinkles flour into the air, dust drifting like gold in the dark. She's using emmer wheat, tough and coarse, the only kind that can survive Egypt's heat. The dough is sticky, resistant, like it doesn't want to become bread at all. It smells faintly sour, the product of wild yeast that no one truly controls. You can sense her frustration, but she keeps kneading anyway. You step outside, and the night wind hits you with the smell of ash and wet grain. Someone nearby is grinding more wheat under moonlight, turning the heavy stones by hand. The sound is rhythmic, like breathing. Scrape, scrape, scrape. You imagine doing that every day, for years. The repetition would drive you half mad, but it's the only way to eat. Bread wasn't just food, it was time made edible. Children sleep beside the ovens, their faces streaked with flour. Their dreams probably smell like smoke and yeast. You feel the warmth radiating from the clay walls, soft and uneven. It's comforting, in a way, knowing that this is what humanity has always done, burned, baked, and bitten through struggle. Bread might have sucked, but it kept people alive long enough to dream about better meals. You run your fingers along the rough surface of a half-baked loaf. It's hard, cracked, uneven. You wonder if anyone here ever tasted sweetness. Honey was rare, reserved for offerings and the rich. For most, this burnt bitterness was all they knew. Yet still, every dawn, the ovens would light again. Proof that hope can rise, even when the bread doesn't. Somewhere in the distance, you hear laughter. Maybe it's the millers teasing each other, or maybe it's just fatigue pretending to be joy. The sound fades into the night, blending with the hum of the desert. The air feels thick, baked with centuries of patience. You realize this bread isn't just food, it's a monument to endurance. Even the gods ate bread, at least symbolically. Temples received daily loaves as offerings, piled before statues with painted eyes. The priests would later eat what the gods didn't finish, calling it holy. You picture a priest chewing grit in silence, pretending it tastes divine. Maybe faith was just another word for pretending something awful is sacred. By now, the oven has cooled. The embers glow red, the smoke fading into the ceiling cracks. You sit with what's left of the loaf, hard, uneven, almost stone. You can feel its weight in your hand, the warmth dying slowly. Tomorrow, the same thing will happen again. The same dough, the same struggle, the same hope that maybe next time it won't taste like sand. The stars are high now, cold and sharp. You can hear the river again, whispering somewhere beyond the fields. The people of Egypt may have built pyramids for their kings, but this gritty, burnt, stubborn bread was their real monument. Not to glory, but to survival. The courtyard smells warm and bready, like damp grain left too long in the sun. You watch foam slide down a clay jar, thick as porridge, and hear flies land with cheerful authority. Egyptians brewed beer from partially baked loaves soaked in water, strained through reed mats. It mattered because beer was calories you could drink, safer than raw river water, usually. Think of it as liquid bread with commitment issues. You raise the jar when the sour sweetness clings to your tongue, stubborn and familiar. Inside a dim room, women mash crumbly, malted loaves with wooden paddles. The air feels humid, sticky with fermenting sugars. Yeast blooms without permission. No one measures. Everyone intuits. This mattered because consistency meant stable rations for workers and children. It's ancient project management. Trust the bubbles, hope for the best. You sip again and feel a sleepy heaviness, that half-nap feeling where problems blur and chores sound negotiable, at least until the next batch curdles. You peer into clay vats set near the floor, where liquid settles in lazy swirls. The beer is cloudy, flecked with grain, closer to breakfast soup than your idea of a pint. Workers needed this: carbohydrates, some protein, a gentle buzz to quiet dust in their throats. It's comfort disguised as nutrition. You picture a modern energy drink, but thicker, slower, and much more patient. The warm scent wraps around you, asking you to stay a while longer, to swallow your doubt and nod. A child toddles by with a tiny cup, tilting it like an offering. You smell sweetness, then something faintly vinegary. The batch turned a little. Still, they drink. Beer functioned like wages, rations tallied in jars beside grain. A second currency. That mattered because it bound loyalty to the granary more effectively than speeches. Imagine payday as a frothy ladle. You listen to the child giggle, lips shining, and realize comfort doesn't need perfection. It only needs to arrive on time. Near the doorway, you catch sunlit dust, floating like pale confetti. A brewer stirs slowly, murmuring to the pot as if coaxing a shy animal. Bread loaves made from emmer and barley break apart, releasing starch. Hot water coaxes sugars into the liquid. This mattered because predictable brewing kept households steady against bad floods. It's the original home insurance, a vat that can absorb surprises. You feel the room's heartbeat, soft, repetitive, and your shoulders loosen despite the heat. You lean over a reed filter and smell damp straw and warm cereal. Someone pours the beer through, trapping rough bits for cattle feed. Nothing wastes, everything loops back. That mattered because closed circles kept famine a step away. You might call it circular economy, they called it common sense. You watch the stream turn from murky to merely opaque, and the sound, steady, compliant, feels like a kindly aunt, smoothing out the day's wrinkles with patience and a ladle. By evening, the drink tastes brighter, bubbles pricking the tongue. You hear soft clinks of clay cups, laughter bending around fatigue. Temples took beer as offerings, festivals required it, crews hauling stones demanded extra rations. It mattered because shared intoxication softened hard edges, mending social seams. Think of it as ancient HR, one jar per conflict. You exhale, warm in the stomach, and the world tucks in its corners, smelling faintly of toast and river reeds. Of course, not all batches behaved. You catch a whiff of something swampy, a jar infected by uninvited microbes. People drank anyway, arguing the gods liked surprises. That mattered because fragile systems can't afford to be picky. Calories trumped elegance. Imagine quietly convincing yourself that funky is a flavor note, not a problem. You set the jar aside, promise to revisit later, and step toward fresher pots where the air feels less argumentative and more like breakfast. A brewer wipes her hands and adds a pinch of aromatic herbs, maybe coriander, maybe something nameless her mother trusted. The room smells brighter, greener, like shade in a garden. Small tricks mattered. They disguised flaws, lifted spirits, and stretched supplies. It's culinary illusion with honest intentions. You tilt your cup and find the bitterness pleasantly grounding, like good advice delivered without apology. The hiss of fermenting foam answers, content as a cat in a warm doorway. You pass a doorway where workers queue quietly, clay mugs ready. Overseers tally rations by notches on wooden tags. The system breathes order. That mattered because structured comfort deters panic. Think cafeteria lindy, but your lunch is mildly alcoholic and negotiates with thirst. You listen to their voices, low, grateful, a little resigned, and the beer's smell deepens into something companionable, like a friend who doesn't fix problems but sits with you until they sting less. Outside, twilight cools the courtyard, and the beer tastes gentler, as if the day's heat has finally given up. You watch a family share a jar, each sip brief but ceremonial. Beer glued households together. You could face sand-filled bread if the cup circled back to you. It mattered because routines hold people when luck won't. You swallow slowly and feel a soft hush settle, like linen laid over a restless thought. Before you leave, a brewer pats the clay vat affectionately, the way you might tap a reliable old appliance. The air carries the scent of warm grain and faint fruit. Beer wasn't glamorous, it was stubbornly present, sometimes harmful, often helpful, always there. That mattered because survival prefers consistency over brilliance. You set your cup down, and the night takes a long breath, promising another batch tomorrow, for better or worse, mostly both. You duck into a kitchen that isn't quite a room. 3 walls, a doorway, and a roof that apologizes to the sky. The air scratches your throat with smoke from dung cakes and brushwood. A clay hearth crouches like a pet, radiating steady heat. Egyptians cooked outside or in semi-open spaces. Ventilation mattered more than pride. That mattered because fires fed people but punished lungs. Think rustic chic, but the filter is your eyelashes. You blink until tears find their manners and behave. A pot sings a soft, wet rattle as lentils bump against its sides. Steam rises smelling of onions and something earthy, maybe fenugreek. Most meals were stews, humble, predictable, gentle on tough grain. That mattered because long simmering transformed stubborn ingredients into cooperation. Imagine a slow cooker that predates clocks. You touch the pot's rim and feel time sliding along its edge, convincing impatience to sit down and make itself useful for once. On a flat stone, a woman crushes garlic with a rhythm older than earrings. The paste glows pale under a smear of oil, sharp scent opening your sinuses. Garlic and onion were medicinal luxuries and practical flavor, gods for tired tongues. That mattered because appetite needs encouragement when bread tastes like quarry dust. It's motivational speaking, but edible. You watch her scrape the paste into the pot, and the steam answers with a bright, persuasive sigh that promises patience will taste better shortly. Shelves of sun-baked pottery line the wall, some patched, some cracked, all faithful. Clay absorbs flavors. Old pots remember dinners. This mattered because continuity improves cooking even when ingredients refuse to cooperate. It's a culinary savings account, interest paid in taste. You run a finger along a rim and feel a fine grit, a reminder that kitchens here wrestled sand daily and still managed comfort. The pot beside your hand hums again, a small reassurance with steam for punctuation. A boy fans the hearth with a woven palm frond. The smoke leans away like a scolded cat. Fuel was precious. Twigs, straw, dung transformed into heat with careful choreography. That mattered because efficient fires stretched scarce resources and kept dinner on schedule. Picture an ancient energy audit, fewer coughing fits, more edible stew. You hear the fire settle into a reliable crackle, and your shoulders decide to relax a notch without asking permission. In a corner, a low table holds bread shards, chopped greens, and a small dish of salt. The salt smells faintly oceanic, even here, soft crystals winking in the light. Seasoning mattered because small pleasures guard morale better than speeches. It's diplomacy conducted by pinches. You watch someone crumble dry bread into the stew, thickening it, coaxing flavor forward, and the pot answers with a deeper, friendlier bubble that sounds confident about being dinner. A cat slides through the doorway, tail an exclamation mark, hunting with the patience of someone owed rent. Kitchens courted cats because cats courted rodents. Both arrangements saved grain. That mattered because lost grain means thinner winters. Consider it integrated pest management, elegant, furry, self-cleaning. The cat claims a corner, and the room's tension loosens as if everyone agreed to outsource one anxiety. You feel the place breathe. Pot, fire, hands, whiskers, each rehearsed and necessary. You notice water stored in cool jars, paws sweating gently in the heat. Jars mattered. They tamed temperature, softened the day's anger, and kept grit from every sip. This mattered because cleanish water supports every chore in a kitchen where sterile is a devotional fantasy. Think of clay as the humble engineer of comfort. You sip and catch a whisper of minerals, a low, kind taste like advice from someone who rarely raises their voice. On a reed mat, chopped fish waits under leaves, its smell bright and insistent. Fish was a gift of the river, salted or dried to outlast moods and floods. That mattered because protein keeps shoulders from collapsing after fields steal your spine. Consider it the Nile's apology card. The cook slips pieces into the stew, the broth leans richer, and you feel a quiet click inside, like a lock turning toward security, however temporary. Smoke scrawls patterns on the ceiling, a charcoal diary of every meal. Soot collects where stories cling longest. Kitchens stained black told visitors what mattered here. Fire, patience, repetition. That mattered because identity grows where daily effort accumulates. It's branding, but honest. You trace a fingertip through a clean streak and smell ash, heat, onion, grease translated into memory. The pot burps approvingly, and the room seems to nod with it. Someone ladles stew into bowls, the surface gleaming with a thin halo of fat. You smell something toasted, perhaps a few cumin seeds kissed by the pan. Garnish is small, but dignity isn't measured in ladles. That mattered because presentation persuades hunger to feel respected. Imagine plating, but the plate is a grin. You taste a spoonful, soft lentils, sweet onion, a whisper of river. It's modest, earnest, and stubbornly comforting, even while the sand negotiates with your molars. As evening folds around the doorway, the hearth's glow feels like a kept promise. Smoke thins, the cat yawns, bowls empty to the patient scrape of wooden spoons. These kitchens weren't pretty, they were persuasive. That mattered because beauty doesn't keep you alive. Argumentative stews do. You step back into the night with your clothes smelling of smoke and garlic, a scent that says tomorrow will happen, and when it does, someone will light the fire again. You enter a courtyard paved with limestone, polished to a pale glow under the sun. The air smells cleaner here, almost perfumed, touched with baked honey and incense. Servants move quietly, carrying trays covered in linen, the clatter of bronze bowls softened by distance. This is where Egypt's upper world eats, a realm where food stops being survival and becomes performance. You watch a scribe record quantities of meat, his reed pen scratching like an insect. Wealth here isn't gold, it's menu variety. You notice the aroma of roasted goose drifting from a shaded corner. The fat hisses as it drips into the fire, a luxury few could even imagine tasting. The cook wipes sweat with a linen cloth that used to belong to someone richer than him. Food mattered here because it confirmed rank, a daily ritual of proof. Every bite said, "I matter more than you." The smell of meat was more political and divine, floating upward as incense for invisible hierarchies. At the center of the courtyard, a noble reclines on a woven mat, plucking at figs and dates arranged on pottery so fine it hums in the light. His fingers are stained with honey, his smile lazy with certainty. You realize that for him, hunger is entertainment, something to play with, not fear. That mattered because distance from hunger created power. You might call it privilege, they called it favor of the gods. The gods, of course, ate even better. You step closer to the table and see wine diluted with water, tinted with herbs. It smells sharp, grassy, almost medicinal. Grapes were rare, an import, proof that the drinker was closer to heaven than to the soil. That mattered because scarcity turned indulgence into language. Each sip was a sentence of superiority. You imagine the noble thinking himself immortal, while servants wait behind him, pretending not to smell the sweetness they'll never taste. The servants move like ghosts, folding napkins, pouring oil, refilling cups. You watch their eyes, alert, careful, uninvited. They must stay invisible, part of the furniture that feeds the elite. That mattered because silence was safety. One mistake could mean hunger again, or worse. You see a servant swallow hard as he carries a platter of beef ribs, his throat flexing like he's tasting the smell. He won't. Not tonight. Maybe never. A priest joins the feast, his shaven head reflecting sunlight. He blesses the meal with practiced word, not for gratitude, but for optics. The divine approval adds seasoning richer than spice. Food was diplomacy between gods and men, and priests were the waiters of heaven. That mattered because religious theatre justified appetite. If the gods accepted the offering, who dared question the gluttony? You can't help but smirk. Faith, like food, was often chewed by the same mouths. The platter returns with only bones and grease. A slave gathers them in silence, tossing them into a clay bin for boiling into broth. Waste didn't truly waste here. It simply changed owners. That mattered because survival always trickled downward. The poor lived on leftovers, proof that luxury and starvation were neighbors separated by a single wall. You hear the scraping of plates, the soft burp of satisfaction, and somewhere beyond, a baby crying from hunger. Egypt's balance was always uneven. You step aside as musicians begin to play. Flutes, hand drums, the laughter of people pretending fullness is happiness. The rhythm fills the air, bouncing off the walls, trying too hard to feel carefree. That mattered because celebration distracted from fragility. The Nile could flood wrong next year, and all this gold would mean nothing. You catch the noble's grin. Wide, easy, fleeting. Even he knows it. That's why he eats like tomorrow isn't guaranteed. You glance at the food, mounds of bread, baskets of dates, bowls of lentils swimming in oil. The spread looks abundant, almost obscene. Yet you know half of it will spoil, tossed away by sunrise. That mattered because abundance loses meaning when it never costs effort. You realize how strange it is when a civilization built on scarcity, yet defined by display. The irony smells faintly of roasted goose and denial. The light shifts, shadows lengthen across the table. You can hear distant grinding stones from the worker villages, faint and persistent, like a conscience humming in the background. That sound mattered more than the music here. It was the pulse that fed everyone, even those who forgot what real hunger felt like. You imagine those stones turning while the nobles sleep, the bread baking for another feast they'll never see. As the feast ends, servants pour water over hands scented with myrrh. The air fills with murmurs of satisfaction. You catch the scent of oil lamps being lit, sharp, resinous, ancient. The noble leans back, drowsy and full. You realize he's not thinking about tomorrow. That's someone else's problem. That's how privilege always tastes. Warm, heavy, and slightly spoiled. You step out of the courtyard into the night, and the air changes. The smell of perfume gives way to sweat, the hush of luxury replaced by distant chatter. You look back once and see the light flickering on the stone walls, golden and temporary. Even here, where food pretends to be glory, the hunger for control never ends. It just eats with better plates. The next morning, the city wakes before the sun. You step into the market, and it's already alive, a mosaic of shouts, smoke, and smell. The air feels thick with spice dust and human heat. You hear donkeys braying, women haggling, the slap of sandals against dry earth. This is Egypt's stomach, messy, loud, and irreplaceable. Food begins and ends here, where copper coins and patience trade, places faster than breath. You pass a line of stalls shaded by woven mats. Onions hang in bunches like ornaments. Fish glisten on reed trays, already smelling like tomorrow. The scent hits you hard. Salt, decay, river. It mattered because freshness had a half-life of hours in this heat. Every purchase was a gamble between price and spoilage. You imagine mothers sniffing each fish like detectives, trying to guess whether dinner will poison or please. Someone yells about barley prices. Another waves a basket of figs with the pride of a merchant king. You see flies swirling in golden clouds above the produce. The noise never stops. This mattered because chaos was currency. Sound meant life, trade, circulation. A quiet market was a dying one. You watch a woman trade 2 onions for a handful of lentils, her face calm, her hands trembling, just a little. Hunger negotiates in small motions. The baker's stall smells of warm air and soot. You watch him pull loaves from an oven shaped like a beehive, each one rough and uneven. He slaps them onto a mat, their crusts cracking softly as they cool. That mattered because markets fed not only bodies but trust. Every loaf sold was a small promise that the world, for now, still worked. You can almost taste the bread dust on your tongue, sharp as stone, familiar as breath. A butcher nearby sharpens his knife on a rock, long and slow. You watch him cut thin slices of goat meat, salted, ready to dry under the sun. The smell of iron mixes with the sweetness of dates from the next stall, life and death sharing the same breeze. That mattered because survival never picked a single flavor. You realize how similar it is to modern cities. One side sells joy, the other necessity, both pretending not to notice the other's smell. You stop at a vendor selling spices from baskets: cumin, coriander, fenugreek, sesame. The air feels alive with scent, earthy, warm, almost electric. Spices mattered because they disguised flaws, turning desperation into craft. They were Egypt's version of optimism in powdered form. You breathe it in, your nose stinging slightly, and think about how little it takes to trick the tongue into hope. Further down, children carry jars of beer, sloshing amber liquid onto the ground. It mixes with dust, forming sticky trails that smell faintly sweet. Men sit under awnings, drinking and bargaining. Beer oiling business was normal. Moderation was optional. That mattered because commerce needs courage, and beer gives it cheaply. You smile, realizing that even here, intoxication was just another negotiation tool. Ancient networking in liquid form. A priest passes through the crowd, his linen spotless against the dust. Merchants lower their voices. Offerings for the temple are collected discreetly. Grain, fruit, sometimes a chicken tied by its feet. This mattered because religion owned appetite. Even markets paid tithes to gods with endless stomachs. You imagine the priests returning later, eating those same sacrifices under divine silence. Everyone feeds someone. Near the end of the street, a boy sells garlic and salt, his feet bare, his eyes sharp. You can tell he's memorized faces. Who pays well, who haggles cruelly, who steals. The rhythm of survival turns him old before his time. That mattered because food, in the end, teaches memory faster than school. You drop a coin into his hand. He doesn't smile, just nods once, already calculating his next sale. As the sun climbs higher, the market becomes unbearable. Heat rises from the ground in shimmering waves. The smell of fish thickens, sweet and rotten. Dogs wander between stalls, tails low, scavenging crumbs. You feel the pulse of a civilization beating through noise and need. This was Egypt's true capital. Not Thebes, not Memphis, but here, between onions and sweat. By noon, the shouting fades into rhythm. Predictable, ancient, strangely peaceful. You realize this chaos was their heartbeat, the proof that life continued despite heat, hunger, and sand. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you like a tide. Somewhere a bell rings, somewhere else a baby cries. It's all part of the same song, one that says, "We're still eating, we're still alive." You stand inside a temple courtyard, where the air tastes of incense and cooked grain. The scent is sweet at first, then bitter, like honey gone tired. Priests move with choreographed grace, carrying trays piled high with bread, onions, figs, and roasted goose. Offerings, they call them, though you can tell the gods aren't the ones who will be chewing. The statues loom above, painted eyes staring past the food toward eternity. You feel small and faintly hungry for both dinner and meaning. Each morning, the ritual repeats. Food is brought, blessed, and arranged with precision that borders on anxiety. You watch a young priest smooth the surface of a barley loaf with his fingers, muttering a prayer that sounds more like an excuse. That mattered because imperfection here invited divine irritation, or at least human consequences. You realize gods are often just mirrors for whoever runs the kitchen. The bread glows under candlelight, soft as surrender, waiting to be eaten twice. Once symbolically, once literally. The offerings sit for hours before the priests return. The temple grows still, the smell of cooked meat turning heavier, warmer. Flies gather, unbothered by holiness. You hear the faint buzz, the soft drip of fat onto stone. When the door closes again, the room feels less sacred, more like a leftover banquet hall. This mattered because nothing was wasted, not even sanctity. The priests would soon eat what the gods ignored, calling it holy recycling. Faith, it seems, also needs a lunch break. You see them now, the same priests who whispered prayers earlier, tearing into bread, dipping it into bowls of stew, still warm from the altar. They eat quickly, heads down, not out of shame, but habit. The food tastes divine, mostly because no one else gets it. That mattered because religion doubled as a ration system. To feed the gods was to feed yourself, provided you were on the right side of the curtain. The divine menu always trickled down. The sound of chewing echoes softly against the temple walls, mingling with the hiss of incense smoke. The smell is layered: spiced oil, sweat, candle wax, and roasted fowl. It feels dense enough to touch. You imagine how strange this must have seemed to the laborers outside, watching the priests feast while pretending it was all symbolic. It mattered because spectacle keeps order. People believe better when they can smell what they'll never taste. A scribe nearby records every item consumed, his reed pen scratching quietly. Bread, 30 loaves; beer, 2 jars; goose, 1, half eaten. You glance at him and wonder if the gods get copies of these reports. The bureaucracy of worship fascinates you, a devotion measured in portions. That mattered because control requires counting. Even hunger, in Egypt, came with paperwork. You exhale softly, amused, as incense curls toward the ceiling like smoke from a guilty kitchen. Outside, a line of beggars waits by the temple gates. They know what happens to the leftovers. When the priests are done, the scraps are tossed to the poor, crumbs of holiness. The crowd swells, hands reaching for what the gods declined. The smell of grease and ash fills the air. You watch a child catch a piece of bread mid-air, smiling as if fortune itself fell from heaven. It mattered because charity here was theatre, but still, it fed someone. You look back at the statues, stone faces that never blink, never chew. Offerings sit again for the evening ritual, endless repetition of hunger disguised as worship. You feel the rhythm of it, the futility and comfort. To feed a god is to admit your own emptiness. You almost laugh at the cosmic irony that the only beings in Egypt who never went hungry were carved from stone. Night falls, and the temple quiets. You hear the faint crackle of oil lamps dying, the shuffle of sandals fading into silence. The offerings will start again at dawn, just like the Nile's tide. You realize religion here wasn't about forgiveness or heaven. It was about dinner, about keeping the balance between the seen and the starving. You breathe in the scent of smoke and barley and think, maybe faith was just another kind of hunger, one that never ends. As you step outside, the night air hits you like cool linen. The stars hang sharp above the temple roof, indifferent witnesses to another day's devotion. You hear distant laughter, maybe from a market tavern, maybe from a god with a sense of humor. The scent of cooking drifts through the streets, human again, imperfect, alive. You smile softly. Even holiness, it seems, can't resist the smell of dinner. You walk along the riverbank as the moonlight shivers on the water. Somewhere upstream, more food is being prepared for morning rituals. The Nile flows quietly, carrying prayers, crumbs, and the illusion of fairness. Egypt keeps feeding its gods because it doesn't know what else to do. You listen to the river sigh, as if it too is full and still unsatisfied. By the time you turn away, the temple has disappeared into darkness. Only the smell remains, sacred, stale, and strangely human. You realize now that in ancient Egypt, even the divine had leftovers, and mortals were just lucky enough to share them. The village glows faintly under the moon, its houses small cubes of dust and patience. You duck into a doorway where a single flame flickers in a clay lamp. The air inside smells like lentils and smoke, like something trying to be warmth. A family sits cross-legged around a bowl. They don't speak much. Words waste energy. You hear the scrape of spoons, the slow chewing. The stew looks like mud, but smells comforting, humble. You feel yourself soften at the sight. The father passes his portion to the youngest child. His hands are cracked, skin flaking like the soil he works. It mattered because food here wasn't shared equally, but lovingly. Hunger rearranged generosity into hierarchy. You can tell he's pretending he's not hungry. Fathers do that everywhere. His wife looks at him, says nothing, but her eyes record everything. The silence between them feels ancient, older than the pyramids. A pot simmers quietly beside them, bubbling like a tired thought. You smell garlic and maybe coriander, small luxuries borrowed from a better season. The mother stirs slowly, scraping the bottom to keep it from burning. The smoke curls up her arm like a pet snake. It mattered because repetition was survival. Dinner was not a recipe, but an agreement with life. We will do this again tomorrow. You hear the crackle of wood, steady as a heartbeat. A bowl of beer sits nearby, cloudy and warm. The father drinks, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The child giggles as the foam sticks to his beard. Beer is their dessert, their medicine, their prayer. It's weak, but it fills the silence. That mattered because peace doesn't always come from satisfaction. Sometimes it's just the sound of someone else swallowing beside you. You take a breath and almost taste the sweetness, like stale bread, remembering it was once alive. They eat lentils mixed with bits of dried fish, salt, and herbs. You can see the texture, coarse, grainy, stubborn. The smell is both sour and homey. It mattered because simplicity here wasn't choice. It was endurance, dressed as ritual. The family eats with rhythm, the way farmers plant, slowly, methodically, without hope for surprise. You can feel the fatigue in their shoulders even as they chew. A dog sits nearby, patient, tail thumping every few moments. The father tosses him a scrap, and the animal gulps it down. The dog doesn't know about gods or floods, only loyalty and timing. That mattered because companionship made hunger gentler. You watched the scene and realized this was probably the same in every civilization. One creature eating with gratitude, another pretending not to notice its own hunger. The mother collects the empty bowls, stacking them carefully. She scrapes the bottom of the pot with her finger, licks it, and smiles faintly. You can't tell if she's pleased or disappointed. The lamp flickers, throwing moving shadows across the wall. Tiny silhouettes of a family surviving quietly. That mattered because survival, here, was the only art form that everyone mastered. You feel the weight of that art resting heavy but proud in the room. Outside, a chorus of frogs sings from the canal. The night feels thicker now, humid and soft. The family lies down on mats woven from reeds, the smell of the day still clinging to their clothes. The father pulls a blanket over the child and whispers something you can't hear. It's probably about tomorrow, the harvest, the bread, the river. The words dissolve into the sound of breathing. You step out, careful not to wake them. The sky stretches endlessly above you, full of stars that look like grains of sand, frozen mid-air. You think about how much effort it took for that single bowl of lentils to exist. The planting, the water, the grinding, the waiting. It's humbling. Food, you realize, isn't about taste here. It's about proof that the day was worth living through. You hear a distant splash, maybe a crocodile, maybe just the Nile clearing its throat. The air tastes faintly of clay and salt. You feel both heavy and peaceful, like the land itself is sighing after dinner. Egypt's beauty has always been quiet like this, unremarkable at first, until you notice that silence means survival. The lamp inside the hut goes out, and the night reclaims the village. Only the smell of smoke remains, and maybe a faint trace of lentils cooling in the pot. You stand there a moment longer, breathing in what's left of their meal, and you realize that in ancient Egypt, dinner wasn't a celebration. It was gratitude whispered through hunger, one slow bite at a time. You find yourself walking through the necropolis at dawn, when the horizon glows like copper dust. The air feels still, heavy with sand and incense. Somewhere nearby you hear the muffled scrape of a bowl being set on stone. A man kneels beside a tomb, placing small loaves and a jar of beer before a carved doorway. He isn't praying, not really. He's talking to someone he used to feed. The smell of stale bread and smoke fills the quiet. He wipes his hands on his tunic, looks around, then eats a piece himself. This mattered because the line between offering and meal was always soft in Egypt. Feeding the dead meant remembering the living. If the ancestors were satisfied, maybe the crops would listen. The bread tastes like clay, the beer like memory. You watch him chew slowly, eyes half closed, as if pretending his old master still pays him for his labor. Behind him, more people arrive, carrying baskets of onions, dates, and flowers. The tomb walls catch the morning light, the painted scenes flickering alive, servants baking, butchers cutting, women kneading dough. Food was carved into eternity so no one would starve in the afterlife. That mattered because hunger frightened them more than death. You trace a finger over a hieroglyphic loaf, smooth from centuries of belief, and realize faith was simply the first preservation method. The cook lights a small fire, using dried reeds and scraps of dung. Smoke curls upward, sweet and foul at once. He stirs a pot with a wooden stick, muttering half-hearted prayers. The air smells of lentils, garlic, and ash, the same dinner he's cooked every night for 20 years. The flames flicker against the stone, illuminating faces of painted nobles who watch from eternity with perfect posture and unearned appetite. He adds a pinch of salt, then spits into the sand beside him, muttering about prices. You realize that even in sacred places, frustration survives. That mattered because faith never erased human habit. It just put it in better lighting. He finishes the meal, arranges it neatly, and sits back with a sigh. For you, he says to the stone, but it sounds more like, for both of us. You feel warmth rise in your chest, oddly tender. When no one's looking, he breaks another piece of bread and eats. The rule is to feed the dead, not starve yourself. You imagine him laughing once, years ago, when his first offering fell into the sand. Even the gods drop crumbs, he probably said. That mattered because humor keeps devotion alive longer than fear. He drinks a sip of the offering beer, grimaces, and nods approvingly. Not bad for the afterlife. Nearby, a young woman lays flowers beside another tomb. Her offerings are fewer, just onions and a small loaf. She looks at the cook, smiles shyly. He nods back. It's the same ritual for everyone, rich or poor. Death evens the menu. You sense a strange democracy in that, in the way food connects those who can't speak anymore. The smell of onion mingles with incense. You breathe it in, earthy and sacred. By midday, the sun climbs high and the tomb shadows shrink. The cook packs up, leaving crumbs and bones for the wind to claim. You watch him pause once more to look at the doorway, his silhouette trembling in the heat. That mattered because rituals fill the silence that grief leaves behind. He bows slightly, picks up his basket, and starts the long walk home, his sandals whispering over sand that remembers everyone but forgives no one. You follow him past empty fields where locusts hum softly. He hums too, off-key, maybe the same melody his mother used when baking. His basket smells of old onions and clay. You realize how much of Egypt's beauty hides in these invisible lives. Cooks, servants, farmers, people whose names never reached stone, but whose hands kept eternity fed. You can almost taste the humility in the air. When he reaches the village, he gives the leftover bread to a child. For the journey, he says, though neither of them is going anywhere. The bread crumbles easily. The child smiles anyway. You think about how small gestures survive longer than monuments. That mattered because love doesn't need witnesses, just appetite. The sun flares overhead and you can smell dust baking in the heat. That night, somewhere among the tombs, jackals sniff the air. They find what the gods left uneaten. The circle completes itself again in from offering to scavenger, faith to flesh. The cook sleeps deeply in his hut, unaware that even his crumbs serve another hunger. You exhale softly. Maybe that's how eternity works. One long dinner where nobody ever finishes eating. The moon rises pale and unbothered. The wind carries the scent of smoke and garlic far across the desert. You close your eyes, listening to the silence between breaths, and realize that feeding the dead was never superstition. It was just hope, baked, boiled, and left to cool on a stone that never gets hungry. The smell hits you before the noise does. Thick, sour, metallic. You step into a kitchen where something has gone wrong. Pots boil over, smoke stings your eyes, and the air feels swollen with panic. A young cook fans the fire too hard, sending sparks into a pile of straw. Someone shouts. Someone else curses the gods. This isn't a feast, it's survival on fire. You feel your pulse quicken, even as the heat presses close. Flies hover above a tray of raw fish, their wings glinting in the smoke. The cook swats them away, muttering. The fish smells faintly of the Nile, and faintly of regret. Food poisoning wasn't theory here, it was prophecy. That mattered because Egypt's heat punished mistakes swiftly. One bad meal could take down a household. You watch the cook sniff suspiciously, shrug, and toss it into the pot anyway. Hope was always the main ingredient. The stew bubbles angrily, spitting oil onto the floor. You smell garlic, fish, and something acidic, the scent of ambition meeting consequence. The cook wipes sweat from his forehead and adds onions to disguise the taste. You can almost hear his inner monologue. If it smells good, it must be fine. It mattered because deception was survival. Not every lie is cruel. Some just help you swallow dinner. A woman nearby coughs, waving her hand in front of her face. "Too much smoke," she says, but her voice cracks halfway through. The firewood is damp, producing more haze than heat. The room feels like it's closing in, a smoky cocoon of desperation. You hear a pot clatter to the floor, spilling half the stew into the dirt. Nobody swears, they just sigh. In Egypt, disappointment wasn't drama, it was routine. The family gathers anyway, scooping what remains into bowls. The smell is tolerable, the texture questionable. They eat in silence, pretending not to notice the sourness. You can almost taste it, bitter, smoky, wrong. It mattered because hunger makes peace with anything that fills space in your stomach. You feel both sympathy and admiration. Humans, it seems, are experts at pretending something awful is not that bad. Outside, a dog whines, catching the scent. The cook tosses him a bone, half apology, half offering. The animal sniffs it once, then walks away. Even the dog refuses tonight's meal. That mattered because sometimes failure earns more honesty than prayer. You can feel the shame in the cook's shoulders, heavy as wet linen. He stares at the pot as if daring it to redeem him. It doesn't. Later that night, you hear coughing from the next room. Someone's stomach churns. Someone whispers a prayer to Sekhmet, goddess of disease. The air smells of bile and smoke. You realize food in ancient Egypt didn't just nourish, it gambled. Every meal risked something: health, grain, time, reputation. You glance at the fire and wonder how many civilizations were built on the courage to keep eating. The next morning, the sun crawls over the horizon, indifferent. The kitchen looks defeated, ashes, flies, and the faint stink of spoiled fish. Yet someone's already kneeling to start a new fire. That mattered because survival doesn't pause for embarrassment. You hear the scrape of a knife sharpening, the soft thud of dough being kneaded again. Life, relentless as ever, clears its throat and begins another attempt at dinner. You step outside for air, and the scent of the Nile hits you. Damp, fresh, forgiving. The world resets. Farmers head to the fields, children chase each other with reed toys, and smoke begins to rise from a dozen other kitchens, each one a small experiment in hope. You feel a strange affection for this resilience. Even when food betrayed them, Egyptians refused to quit eating. By noon, the cook laughs about last night. "The gods were testing my seasoning," he says. "Humor patches what pride can't." That mattered because laughter disinfects memory. You catch the smell of new stew, simmering. Lentils again, humble and safe. It's bland, but the relief is delicious. You breathe in the steam and think, maybe this is what progress smells like. Edible and uneventful. You turn to leave, feeling the warmth at your back. The fire crackles softly, as if promising not to misbehave this time. The cook hums to himself, steady and calm, each movement deliberate. Egypt's kitchens may have been chaos, but they were persistent chaos. You smile, realizing that sometimes survival is just a long series of second tries. As you walk away, the air lightens, filled with smoke, laughter, and something edible again. You glance at the horizon, another day, another meal, another chance to fail gracefully. And for the people of ancient Egypt, that was enough. You step into a cool chamber where the air smells of damp limestone, ink, and tired breath. A scribe bends over a wooden board, reed pen whispering across it. Today's tally: barley, beer, onions, oil.
Rations decide who stands and who faints on the scaffolds. This mattered because labour moved on calories the way boats moved on water. Think payroll, but edible. He blows gently on the ink, as if cooling the hunger he just organised, then reaches for another tag. Outside the doorway, workers line up, sandals scuffing chalky dust. Their hands look like tools left in the rain, cracked and stubborn.
Each receives a measure of grain and a jar of beer, the amounts set by rank, not appetite. That mattered because fairness here wore a uniform called hierarchy. You watch the scribe mark symbols, precision pretending to be justice. A man nods, thanks for too little, and the line breathes forward, resigned as tide. The room tastes faintly metallic from copper bowls stacked against a wall. The scribe glances at a tablet of complaints. Missing loaves, light measures, beer that stung the tongue like vinegar. Grievances mattered because hungry crews stopped building. He dips the pen again, adding a note to inspect millstones. Code for stop breaking teeth. You imagine a modern help desk, except the ticket resolution is bread-shaped and overdue. He sighs and rubs the ink stain growing on his thumb. In a sunlit corner, a small scale hangs from a hook, cords frayed but loyal. Weights carved like ducks bob slightly in the breeze. The scribe measures oil, thin and fragrant, each drop questioned by eyes that count for a living. That mattered because trust can't be eaten, it must be weighed. Think customer service with talons. He levels the beam until it stills, then tips the spoon with priestly care, blessing the afternoon with a controlled shine. A messenger arrives smelling of sweat and reed boats. Flood projections look poor. Grain stores must tighten. The scribe's jaw shifts almost invisibly. Scarcity always changes grammar from enough for now to maybe later. This mattered because tomorrow's bread begins with today's restraint. He scratches new numbers, lighter rations by a mouthful. It feels like erasing the future with good penmanship. You hear the murmur outside, disappointment performing calm. He closes the tablet like a door on weather. A foreman strides in, voice oiled by authority. He wants extra beer for his crew. Motivation, he calls it. The scribe smiles politely, a blade wrapped in linen. Policies matter more than desire. Desire is where theft begins with manners. He quotes the rules scroll, slow as honey, then grants a half jar, enough to soothe, not enough to spoil. Think HR meeting where the biscuit is symbolic. The foreman grunts, thanks, ambition diluted, and leaves counting aloud to convince himself. The room darkens as dust clouds drift past the doorway. The scribe sips water from a porous jar, cool as forgiveness. He eats a tiny fig from a cloth pouch, pretending he doesn't. Personal provisions mattered. Officials ate privately to avoid bad theatre. Hunger hates audiences. He writes a side note for the bakery. Check sieve cloths. Less grit means fewer curses. You feel a small respect bloom, like an herb that refuses the soil's bad attitude. He flips to a tax ledger, papyrus smelling faintly of river and thyme. Villages owe grain, temples claim exemptions with divine signatures. Paperwork becomes appetite wearing ceremonial eyeliner. That mattered because power eats first, legally and beautifully. he traces columns where gods receive feasts and men receive portions. You think of corporate budgets where snacks are strategy. He dots a final total, knowing the number is honest and still not true. Mathematics can't cook dinner. A woman enters, clothes powdered with flour, bringing a bread sample for record. It's dense, cratered, warm in the hands like a small argument. She waits while he breaks it open and tastes. The grit is less vicious today. Improvement matters in crumbs. He nods, writes, acceptable, and the relief on her face tastes sweeter than dates. You realize quality control here is strangely intimate. Two people sharing a problem with their teeth and calling it civilization. By late afternoon, the chamber smells of tired ink and spent authority. He rolls up the papyrus, binding it with a frayed cord that remembers better days. Outside, the line dissolves into footsteps and lunch. The scribe remains, recalculating quietly, feeding the future with numbers small enough to swallow. That mattered because someone must count when gods pretend they already did. He palms a second fig, hesitates, and puts it back. Moderation performs its little victory. Evening light angles across the floor like measured mercy. He cleans his pen in a shallow dish, water black with reminders. The ledger stack looks like a sleeping animal, dangerous if kicked, loyal if fed. He places a seal on today's ration tablet, wax smelling faintly of smoke. Ritual matters. It tells the anxious that rules still breathe. He stands, bones muttering, and smooths his tunic, a crease of dignity pressed against famine's face. You step out with him into a corridor that smells of chalk and sweat and cautious hope. Workers sit in the shade, chewing bread into cooperation, sipping beer into patience. The scribe watches for a breath too long, eyes soft. His numbers did not fill them, but they did not fail them either. That mattered because survival rarely feels like victory. It feels like not losing yet. He nods once, to them or himself, and disappears into the hour. Moonlight lays a silver band across the Nile, cool as a blade against your wrist. Two fishermen push a narrow boat from the reeds, wood creaking like old knees. The air smells of wet mud, crushed papyrus, and fish skins turned into memory. Night matters because heat sleeps and predators blink slower. You step aboard and feel the boat accept your weight with suspicious courtesy, the way rivers do when they're deciding whether to keep you. The older man casts a net that whispers as it opens, a dark flower unfolding on water. He learned the throw from a father who learned it from a shadow on a wall. Fish sleep near the surface, lazy with trust. That mattered because breakfast begins at midnight in Egypt. You hear a soft plop as the weights kiss the river, polite and final. The younger man grins. Hunger respects competence like religion respects timing. A lantern sputters, oil smelling like hot olives, light skating across ripples. Moths orbit the flame as if it is a small god taking appointments. The older fisherman mutters about crocodiles, always the quiet ones. Predators owned the same river that fed everyone. That mattered because provision never travels without risk. You think of grocery runs that require courage points. He taps the boat's side twice, superstition signing its attendance sheet, and the silence grows obedient. The first haul rises heavy, river water bleeding through the mesh. Tilapia thrum against the net, a desperate drumbeat. Scales flash like shaken coins. Fish meant protein, trade and stories that inflate by lunch. That mattered because meat swam more freely than it walked. They swing the net aboard, hands slick with a clean, metallic smell that tastes like relief. The younger man laughs softly. The sound feels like an extra ration nobody counted. They gut the catch quickly, flicking entrails to the river with practiced flicks. The water sighs acceptance. Everything here recycles emotions and organs. Guts draw bigger fish and unwanted witnesses. That mattered because bait isn't just for hooks, it's for realities. You imagine an economics lecture taught by a catfish. The knife whispers a longbone, and the lantern nods in rhythm, casting moving tattoos on their forearms, maps of a night that prefers not to be remembered. A sudden splash punches the quiet, low and heavy. The boat tilts as something large rolls just beneath. Crocodile, maybe hippo. The river holds both like complicated jokes. The older man freezes, hand on the net, eyes narrowed into prayers without grammar. This mattered because death negotiates too, and sometimes it accepts a postponement fee. He waits, counts to 10, then to an older number only fishermen know. The water smooths its face, pretending innocent. They row further out, wood thudding in sockets, breath measured in edits. The younger man sprinkles crushed herbs on a ragged piece of reed mat, a trick his mother swore calmed fish and men. The air smells greener, like patience with a garden. Superstition mattered because control in Egypt was mostly rented space. You smile at the small ritual working not at all, and entirely, relaxing hands, loosening jaws, telling courage to stop pacing. On the second cast, the net returns lighter, the river slipping it back like a loan it regrets. Disappointment smells like old rope and wishful thinking. They shrug together, a duet of survival. That mattered because the river is not a partner. It's a jury with seasonal moods. The older man adjusts his throw, angle smaller, wrists kinder. Technique is stubborn hope wearing muscle. The lantern flickers approval, a tiny boss with no budget. The third haul surprises them, silver bodies writhing like punctuation marks ecstatic to be included. The boat lists under sudden certainty. Fish slap the boards, scattering scales that sparkle like cheap stars. Protein for stew, dried strips for lean weeks, a few to sell at dawn. That mattered because planning is just appetite with a calendar. They sought the catch, hands moving faster than talk, each decision a recipe written in gestures. A breeze rises from the south, cool and lettuce crisp. It carries the damp sweetness of far-off marsh and the peppery hint of river flowers. The older man breathes deeper, shoulders loosening. Wind mattered because smell tells stories earlier than sight. You think of weather apps that taste like papyrus and patience. He ties the net with a satisfied tug, and the boat seems to sit taller, stomach full, intentions settled. They beach the boat in reeds that hiss like gossip. Frogs audition for the morning chorus. The younger man cleans a final fish on the prow, knife whispering, water accepting. A small pile of scales gleams on the mud like coins from a generous dream. That mattered because ritual closes the book without slamming it. He rinses his hands, and the river forgives him for borrowing its animals. The lantern dies with a courteous sigh. Dawn stains the horizon with diluted pomegranate. Smoke begins to rise from village hearths, thin and hopeful. The fishermen shoulder baskets that smell like iron and breakfast, feet whispering sand confessions. Night gave them enough, never plenty, never empty, just the exact measure survival respect. That mattered because Egypt ran on transactions between luck and skill. You follow them toward the market, where hunger will argue kindly with price, and the day will pretend to be simple again. By the time the fishermen reach the market, the sun has turned the city into a furnace. The smell is overwhelming. Sweet rot, crushed herbs, old beer, and something faintly metallic that sticks to the back of your throat. Vendors shout over one another, voices roar, promising freshness that's already gone. You see baskets of fruit collapsing in the heat, their skins splitting like small wounds. The Nile gave plenty, but time stole faster. You feel the weight of impermanence clinging to everything. A man holds up a fish, its silver dull and eyes milky. Fresh, he insists. You can smell the lie from across the stall. Still, someone buys it. Hunger always negotiates before pride. That mattered because illusion was part of survival, a shared agreement that decay could be delayed if everyone pretended not to notice. The coins clink, and the buyer leaves quickly, nose wrinkling. You imagine the dinner later, a stew perfumed with denial. Further down, a woman sells onions, her fingers stained with soil. Their scent cuts through the rot like medicine. Onions were Egypt's deodorant, currency, and cure. Workers ate them before digging tombs. Priests avoided them entirely, claiming purity. That mattered because smell shaped morality here. To reek of onions meant you were human, alive, sweating honestly. You take one, inhale deeply, and the sting in your eyes feels like the river reminding you who it feeds first. Nearby, a spice merchant fans the air above baskets of cumin, coriander, and dried mint. The powders shimmer like dusted gold in the light, catching the sweat on his arms. He lets you smell a pinch, earthy and warm, proof that flavor can survive heat if you treat it kindly. That mattered because Egypt's cuisine was less about abundance than endurance. Seasoning reality so it tasted bearable. You sneeze softly, and he grins, proud of his invisible luxury. At another stall, dates glisten like small amber stones piled high on palm leaves. You bite one, and sweetness floods your mouth, dense, dark, almost intoxicating. The merchant smiles. From the south, he says, meaning expensive. Dates stored sunlight better than any god, feeding both kings and field hands. That mattered because sugar was time slowed down, a way to cheat decay for one more day. You wipe your fingers on your tunic and feel them stick with history. Children dart between stalls carrying small clay jars of beer. Some spill, and the sour-sweet smell mixes with dust. You hear laughter, but also coughing, a dry, tired sound. Beer was hydration for those without clean water, but it carried its own punishments, infection, parasites, and headaches that felt divine. That mattered because comfort in Egypt often came with a receipt. You watch a man drink straight from the jar, his lips leaving a foamy mustache of both pleasure and risk. In the corner, a butcher slaps a goat carcass onto a table. The sound is wet and final. Flies gather immediately, a buzzing choir of inevitability. He waves a fan, half-hearted. Meat was rare enough to ignore hygiene. That mattered because survival overrules disgust, a lesson every civilization relearns in heat. You glance away, catching the shimmer of blood drying on the stone, and the color burns into your eyes like a signature you can't unsee. Two women argue over the price of barley, their voices sharp and musical. Each holds her ground with the stubborn grace of people who've haggled all their lives. The argument matters less than the ritual of it. Bargaining as theatre, a way to pretend control exists. They end in laughter, coins exchanged, both pretending they won. You realize the market isn't chaos, it's choreography. Each shout, each insult, is a note in a song that never ends. A priest passes through, collecting temple offerings, fruit, bread, oil. Merchants bow their heads, just enough to be polite. The priest's basket fills quickly. Religion eats well even on poor harvests. That mattered because divinity always finds dessert. You watch him bless a stall, muttering words that sound rehearsed. Maybe the gods have stopped listening, but people still listen to themselves when pretending to pray. The smell of incense lingers briefly, then disappears under the weight of fish. A stray dog trots between legs, stealing scraps. No one chases it. Compassion here is practical, not sentimental. That mattered because every creature participates in recycling. You watch the dog carry a bone the size of its head, tail wagging, and for a moment the market feels almost gentle, a shared understanding that waste is just food on its way somewhere else. The thought softens you. Egypt wasn't cruel, it was efficient. By late afternoon, the heat becomes unbearable. Vendors sit on the ground, waving palm fronds over their faces, beer jars half empty beside them. The air thickens with resignation and frying oil. You taste salt on your lips, and it's not from sweat. It's the ghost of the sea trapped in everything they sell. That mattered because geography decided appetite here. Even landlocked hearts crave waves. The Nile whispers nearby, promising another dawn, another market, another gamble. As you walk away, the shouting fades, replaced by the soft hum of cicadas. The sun bleeds into the river, turning it molten red. You glance back once more. The stalls look like relics of resilience, decaying, stubborn, alive. Egypt's markets were never clean, but they were honest. They fed the body and reminded the soul that beauty spoils fast, but necessity never does. Inside the palace, the air tastes of honey, roasted meat, and polished stone. Servants hurry through corridors carrying trays covered in linen, their sandals whispering over marble floors. Oil lamps flicker against gold walls carved with gods who seem to smirk at the luxury below. The scent is intoxicating. Cinnamon, myrrh, and something smoky beneath. You realize this isn't just dinner, it's theater with calories. The pharaoh doesn't dine, he performs divinity by chewing slowly. The table stretches farther than most houses. Platters of goose, beef, figs, and lotus flowers gleam under candlelight. Musicians play softly, their flutes weaving through the chatter like silk threads. Guests sit in linen so fine it looks liquid. They eat with their fingers, licking oil from them without shame. Food mattered here because display meant power. You don't need to conquer. If your dinner already looks immortal, the smell alone could feed envy for miles. A servant pours wine mixed with honey and herbs into cups carved from alabaster. The liquid glows like amber fire. You watch the pharaoh lift his cup, eyes half-lidded, smiling the way only men sure of eternity can smile. His voice is low, lazy, but carries weight, every word a decree wrapped in leisure. That mattered because luxury itself was propaganda. If the king appeared full, Egypt must be safe. The people outside didn't need proof, just rumors of flavor. In the corner, musicians play faster now, drums, claps, laughter, breaking rhythm. Dancers move in slow circles, their skin glistening with oil. The scent of lotus fills the hall, sweet and slightly sickening. The pharaoh watches without blinking, more statue than man. This mattered because pleasure here wasn't about enjoyment. It was control made graceful. Every gesture told the gods, I can afford to waste. You feel the decadence press against your skin, heavy as heat. You glance toward the servants' table. Smaller, darker, quieter. They eat scraps of the same meal, bones, crumbs, sauce from bowls. Their eyes flick upward sometimes, quick and guilty. The contrast is sharp enough to taste. That mattered because even luxury creates leftovers, and leftovers feed the system. You realize civilization runs on crumbs of grandeur, recycled endlessly until the poorest finally get to lick the pot. Egypt understood hierarchy better than hunger. The pharaoh laughs, suddenly deep and booming. A goose leg tears in his hand, grease shines on his lips. Everyone else laughs too, perfectly timed. You can smell roasted fat, spiced with something floral, rose petals, maybe saffron. It's beautiful and grotesque at once. That mattered because worship is easiest when it smells like dinner. You imagine gods leaning down, curious whether immortality tastes like overcooked bird. A poet stands and recites verses about abundance, the Nile's generosity, the god's kindness, the king's stomach. Words drip with flattery. The crowd hums approval. It's the oldest human ritual. Feed the powerful. Praise them for eating. Pretend it feeds you too. The poet bows, rewarded with a fig. That mattered because truth was always paid in fruit, not courage. You can feel the air thicken with satisfaction, perfumed by hypocrisy. The music softens. Servants refill cups, pour oil over lamps, adjust flowers wilting under heat. Even beauty is high maintenance in Egypt. The pharaoh leans back, eyes distant. Maybe he's thinking of eternity. Maybe he's just full. That mattered because gluttony here wasn't sin. It was policy. The more he consumed, the more Egypt believed it would never starve. You can almost hear the logic crumble under its own weight, gentle and inevitable. A single fly lands on his plate. You notice it. No one else dares. It crawls over the meat like a prophecy of decay. The pharaoh waves lazily, and a servant kills it with his hand. The gesture is small, but the message is enormous. Even rot obeys him. That mattered because denial was the real spice of royalty. You realize the only difference between the palace and the market is the quality of the lie. Outside, the night presses close, thick with smoke and frog song. You can see the faint glow of the city, tiny fires like stars below the real ones. Somewhere, a farmer's family is eating lentils in the dark, unaware that their same grain crowns the king's table. You breathe in the contrast. One scent sweet with luxury, the other bitter with effort. Together, they make the smell of empire. As the feast winds down, servants clear bones and pour water scented with lotus over hands too soft to labor. The room quiets, satisfied. The pharaoh raises his cup one last time, whispering a toast that never reaches you, maybe to eternity, maybe to digestion. The flutes fade, the lamps dim, and Egypt exhales, full for now. You realize this is how civilizations always sound after dinner, loud, bright, and then suddenly, quietly, doomed. The morning begins with sound before light. The scrape of stones, the dull thud of hammers, a distant cough swallowed by wind. You follow the noise to the edge of a construction site near the desert. The air tastes like limestone dust and sweat, thick and grainy on your tongue. Men move in rhythm, pulling ropes, chanting low to keep time. Somewhere nearby, someone bakes bread. The smell drifts faintly through the heat, teasing the workers with the idea of breakfast that isn't theirs. A boy runs past carrying baskets of barley cakes and jars of beer. His feet barely touch the sand, his breath sharp and quick. The men pause to drink, the beer foamy and sour. It smells like smoke and fatigue, and it hits the stomach like whetstone. That mattered because nutrition was logistics, not comfort. You watch their faces, not joy, just relief. In Egypt, sustenance didn't promise strength. It postponed collapse. The overseer stands on a ledge shouting orders, his voice brittle with authority. He chews on a clove of garlic, the smell cutting through the air like a weapon. Garlic was medicine and armor, believed to keep both illness and weakness away. That mattered because fear needed rituals too. You watch him spit into the sand, then swallow another piece, half for health, half for bravado. Even power tastes bitter in this heat. You walk through the camp and feel the texture of hunger, not emptiness, but noise inside the ribs. Workers huddle under scraps of shade, sharing pieces of bread as pale as dust. It crumbles easily, dry as paper. They chew slowly, saving energy for chewing itself. That mattered because labor demanded rhythm. Too fast and you faint, too slow and you're punished. You hear a man laugh mid-bite, a short, dry sound, like wood snapping. Nearby, a woman stirs a pot over a small fire made of dung and straw. The smoke smells sweet and acrid at once, the color of old parchment. She's making stew for the laborers, lentils, onions, maybe a hint of fish if they're lucky. You can smell the salt and mud from here. It's humble, and yet the smell feels strangely alive, almost defiant. That mattered because flavor, even faint, turns survival into memory. She hums softly as she stirs, a lullaby against exhaustion. A man leans beside her, holding his stomach and smiling weakly. "Better than yesterday," he says. She doesn't answer but ladles him a bowl. The food steams in the air, thick and murky. He sips slowly, lips trembling. The heat burns, but the taste grounds him. Smoke, salt, and gratitude. You feel the moment settle between them, as ordinary as it is sacred. That mattered because dignity in Egypt wasn't wealth. It was the right to eat without begging. The air grows hotter, the wind sharper. Sand stings your arms, clinging like flour. The workers return to their posts, carrying stones that glow white under the sun. You can hear joints cracking, see the tremor in their legs. Someone drops a block, and the silence afterward feels like prayer. That mattered because fatigue was worship too, an offering to endurance. You wipe imaginary dust from your face and feel the ache that builds without belonging to you. At midday, the stew is gone. The pot sits empty, blackened from fire. The woman washes it with sand, her movements slow, deliberate. Cleaning here means convincing dirt to forget its job. You realize how every gesture, eating, stirring, washing, is another conversation with the land. That mattered because Egypt never gave freely, it only negotiated. You breathe in the air, tasting ash and resolve. A worker tears his last piece of bread and holds it up to the sun, squinting through it like stained glass. He smiles faintly. Bread and sunlight, Egypt's two currencies, both unreliable but essential. That mattered because scarcity teaches reverence. You watch him eat it slowly, eyes closed, as if savoring warmth itself. For a moment, hunger looks like peace. The overseer blows a horn to resume work. The noise cuts through the wind like a blade. The men rise, wiping their faces with the same cloths they'll use to carry stones. You feel the earth tremble under synchronized footsteps. The smell of sweat and smoke lingers, heavy but honest. That mattered because survival always has a scent, one that refuses perfume. You realize this is what civilization is made of: bread, dust, and obedience. When evening comes, the light softens into gold. The workers sit again, their shadows long and thin. A breeze moves through the camp, carrying the faint sweetness of drying grain. For the first time all day, the silence feels gentle. They've earned it. That mattered because Egypt's beauty hid inside exhaustion. Quiet proof that even suffering can hum lullabies if you listen slowly enough. You walk away as the stars appear, the sound of chewing fading into night. The air cools, and the ground exhales warmth. The last thing you hear is laughter, low and content, not joy exactly. Something better, the sound of people still here, still hungry, still okay. At dawn, the Nile looks asleep, smooth, silent, pretending innocence. Mist drapes over it like cotton, muffling everything except the soft buzz of insects. You kneel at the edge, and the air smells faintly of clay and something sweetly decaying. Fish ripple just below the surface, teasing the reflection of the rising sun. This river was Egypt's stomach, unpredictable, generous, and vengeful. You can almost hear it breathe. A man nearby fills jars with water, his movements slow and careful. He stops occasionally to scoop floating weeds from the surface. You watch the sunlight catch the droplets sliding down his arm, golden against brown skin. That mattered because water here wasn't just life, it was risk. Every sip was an act of faith in the unseen. You bend closer, catching the smell of wet earth and algae, thick and oddly comforting. Further along the bank, women wash clothes, slapping them against stones. The sound is sharp, rhythmic, a percussion line for mourning. Soap smells faintly of ash and chalk. They laugh between hits, jokes swallowed by wind. That mattered because work became music when words ran out. You imagine their arms sore but steady, turning labor into ritual. You dip your hand into the water. It's cool and soft, like the inside of a melon. A little boy splashes nearby, chasing tadpoles. His laughter rings across the surface, pure and brief. You feel it ripple through you like a memory of something uncomplicated, but his mother shouts for him to stay close. The river has teeth. Crocodiles wait beneath, patient and ancient. That mattered because abundance always hid predators. You picture the water's calm face masking hunger deep below, a reminder that generosity here always charges interest. A fisherman rows past, his boat creaking softly. He greets the women, jokes with the boy, then drops a net with the gentleness of habit. The smell of bait drifts behind him, pungent, real, grounding. He hums a low tune about the river's moods, something half prayer, half complaint. That mattered because superstition filled the space science hadn't invented yet. You listen, unsure whether he's asking for fish or forgiveness. Along the shore, reeds sway in the wind, their tips whispering secrets. Birds dart above, their wings flashing white. One dives, catches a fish, and vanishes into the glare. The surface closes instantly, erasing evidence. That mattered because nature here didn't dramatize, it just continued. You stare at the water and realize Egypt survived by imitating its river, calm outside, relentless underneath. Someone drops a jar, clay shatters, water spilling into dirt. The man curses softly, then laughs, as if scolding fate. The puddle darkens the soil for a moment before vanishing. That mattered because even loss nourished something. Maybe the roots below, maybe patience. You breathe in the damp scent and feel it settle deep in your chest, the smell of endings pretending to be beginnings. Further downstream, oxen wade knee-deep, snorting softly. Their hooves churn mud into chocolate swirls. Farmers shout, their voices carried by wind and gulls. You can smell manure and wet grass, sharp but somehow alive. This was Egypt's perfume, half filth, half fertility. That mattered because beauty here was practical, earned by the body, not invented by art. You find yourself smiling at the honesty of it. A boat of grain sails past, its sail catching sunlight like a prayer flag. Men aboard wave lazily. The wind fills the cloth with a sigh. You realize this same river carried both offerings and corpses, food and plague, prosperity and ruin. That mattered because Egypt's fate was never written on stone. It floated. You feel small before it, grateful, uneasy, and oddly at peace. As the sun climbs higher, the mist burns away. The river turns gold, bright enough to hurt your eyes. The smell of wet clay thickens in the heat, turning metallic, old. You sense that every drop here has been recycled since the first harvest, that somewhere inside it, every meal still waits. Onions, beer, ashes, prayers. That mattered because the Nile wasn't a source. It was a memory loop, feeding itself endlessly. You step back from the edge, feet sinking into mud that grips like gratitude. The water glimmers once more, pretending innocence again. Egypt owed everything to this river, its wealth, its food, its death. You close your eyes and listen, a low murmur, constant, eternal. It sounds like a god breathing through its sleep. And for a fleeting moment you realize that the Nile never fed Egypt out of kindness. It fed it because hunger was the only way to keep people praying. By midday, the city smells like bread and dust, a perfume of exhaustion and hope. You follow the scent down a narrow alley where ovens glow like captive suns. The heat radiates so fiercely that the air seems to shimmer. Bakers move rhythmically, sweat glistening on their forearms as they slap dough against clay walls. Each motion looks rehearsed, half dance, half survival. The bread hisses, bubbles, hardens. It's the sound of Egypt breathing, dry, patient, endlessly repetitive. A young man pulls a loaf from the oven with a stick, his face streaked white with flour. He taps it once, listening. The crust cracks like thin pottery, and a small smile flickers. He passes it to an older woman who inspects it with the gravity of a priestess. bread wasn't just food here. It was ceremony, transaction, worship disguised as carbohydrates. That mattered because baking meant continuity. Even when floods failed or kings died, ovens stayed lit. The walls around you are blackened by centuries of smoke. Ash clings to every surface like memory. The smell is sharp, smoky, faintly sour, yeast and sweat fermenting together in the air. You can almost taste the grit. That mattered because bread here wasn't born of comfort. It was born of necessity. You picture the millstones grinding endlessly nearby, mixing flour with sand, sharpening every meal. The baker's teeth are chipped, their lungs grey, but their hands steady. Outside the bakery, people gather, waiting. Children peer through the smoke, eyes wide, stomachs quieter than they should be. A mother hushes them gently, pointing toward the ovens. Soon, she says, soon is elastic here, sometimes minutes, sometimes eternity. That mattered because patience was Egypt's real currency. You watch them hold their hands near the oven's warmth, not to eat, but just to remember what food feels like before it's real. When the bread emerges, it's shared in pieces. No knives, just fingers, tearing and passing. The sound of crust breaking carries through the street like applause for endurance. The taste is rough, ash, barley, something metallic. You feel it scratch your throat just watching. Yet every face glows faintly, eyes closing on the first bite. That mattered because gratitude can live where flavor doesn't. The people chew slowly, not for taste, but for rhythm, a silent prayer in crumbs. A priest passes by, dropping a coin on the table without breaking stride. The bakers bow slightly. Temples demand their daily share, bread for the gods before mouths for men. You sense no anger, only ritual. The gods eat first, always. That mattered because faith fed order, and order fed survival. You imagine how absurd it must have felt to bake bread for statues, yet somehow it worked. Egypt rose on stomachs that never doubted. The air thickens as another batch goes in. Flames roar, licking at the clay walls. The heat presses against your skin like an accusation. Sweat drips into flour, unnoticed. The bakers move faster, hands red from heat, feet caked with ash. You hear someone humming an old tune. Something steady, comforting, almost bored. That mattered because repetition numbed the fear of hunger. When every day tastes the same, routine becomes salvation. Outside, a donkey brays impatiently, tied to a cart loaded with cooling loaves. The driver fans himself with a straw hat, complaining softly about prices. Everything costs more when the river's angry, he says. You can smell the baked grain even from here. Earthy and alive. It's the scent of hard work turned edible. That mattered because bread connected every Egyptian, from slaves to scribes to kings. No one escaped its taste, good or bad. A small girl sneaks closer, her face smudged with dust. She stretches her hand toward a cooling loaf, but the baker catches her wrist. He pauses, looks at her, then tears off a small piece and gives it anyway. She grins, teeth flashing, and runs off into the crowd. The baker shakes his head, smiling to himself. That mattered because kindness, even crumb-sized, still fed something divine. You feel your throat tighten a little. Egypt's heart wasn't gold. It was this. As the day fades, the ovens cool. The bakers scrape soot from the walls, coughing softly. Smoke drifts upward in lazy spirals, blending into the red sky. The scent of burned grain lingers long after the last loaf leaves. That mattered because food leaves ghosts, and Egypt lived among them peacefully. You realize the bakery feels like a temple, loud, hot, human, and sacred, without trying. You walk away through alleys glowing with embers, each house leaking the smell of bread and conversation. The city feels full, though you know it isn't. Hunger in Egypt never vanished, it just learned good manners. And as the stars appear, the night itself smells faintly of wheat, smoke, and forgiveness. The room is dim, lit by a single oil lamp trembling against the breeze. A scribe sits at a small table, his tools neatly arranged beside a loaf of bread, a jar of beer, and a few shriveled figs. His cough breaks the silence, dry, familiar. The air tastes of old papyrus and burnt oil. This will be his last meal, though he doesn't say it aloud. You can see it in the way his hands linger over the bread, as if memorizing its weight. He tears off a piece and chews slowly. The bread is hard, bitter with ash. He smiles faintly, and not because it's good, but because it's honest. That mattered because in Egypt, truth was rarely spoken, it was eaten. Each bite feels like reconciliation, not pleasure. The beer he drinks next is warm, thick, and slightly sour. He grimaces but nods, as though in agreement with the past. You can almost hear the quiet contract between body and memory. Just one more day. The room smells of dust and faint sweetness, figs softening in the heat. He picks one up, presses it between his fingers until it leaks syrup onto his palm. The taste is cloying, floral, almost too alive. That mattered because sweetness here was rare, and even decay could taste divine. He licks his fingers, sets the fruit down, and sighs. You feel the weight of decades in that breath. Ink, hunger, obedience. On the table, a scroll lies open. The ink shines faintly under the lamplight. It's a list, debts owed, wages recorded, grain accounted for, numbers more consistent than gods. He runs a finger down the columns, mouthing names he'll never meet again. That mattered because order was comfort. He'd spent his life turning chaos into symbols that made the world seem fair. Tonight, the illusion feels tender, almost merciful. Outside, crickets sing. The sound is soft, rhythmic, predictable, the kind of music you can fall asleep to. He listens, eyes half closed, chewing another piece of bread. You can see the crumbs on his beard, the tremor in his jaw. That mattered because even endings need routine. He dips his bread in beer, lets it soak, and swallows. The bitterness dulls. It's almost gentle now. He looks at the door, where the shadows of palm leaves sway. Somewhere beyond, the river murmurs. Its smell seeps faintly into the room. Damp, metallic, eternal. The scribe smiles again. "The Nile will still rise," he whispers, voice thin but certain. That mattered because faith here wasn't about gods. It was about recurrence. You realize he's not afraid of death, only of missing the next flood. He writes a final line on the scroll. Not numbers, but words. May the next life be soft on the teeth. You almost laugh, but it catches in your throat. Humor, this dry feels like prayer, disguised as wit. He places the reed pen down carefully, as if tucking in a child. The lamp, flickers, the air thickens. You hear the faint creak of the table as he leans back, breath slowing, content. Outside, a dog barks once and falls silent. The night folds itself neatly around the house. The smell of oil fades into darkness. The scribe's last exhale sounds like relief. Small, steady, human. You sense that somewhere a ledger closes itself. That mattered because Egypt's greatest magic was symmetry, flood and drought, hunger and feast, life and sleep. You feel your own breath, slow to match his. The lamp sputters and dies. The room goes completely still, except for the distant murmur of the Nile. You can almost hear it whisper his name, carrying it downstream to the fields he once recorded. The river never forgets. It digests everything. Prayers, bodies, crumbs. That mattered because death here wasn't loss, it was redistribution. He gave his labor to Egypt, and Egypt, generous as ever, will take him back grain by grain. The dawn comes softly, spilling gold through the cracks in the wall. Workers pass outside, laughing, hungry, alive. The bread is gone. The beer jar lies empty. Only the figs remain, sweet and wrinkled, like patience left behind. You stand there a moment longer, breathing in the quiet. Then you step outside, the sun warm on your face, and the world begins again, as it always does. The night settles like warm linen over the land, folding softly around the edges of noise. You can almost hear Egypt exhale, a low sigh through the reeds, a ripple across the dark water. The fires have gone quiet, leaving only small orange ghosts where kitchens once glowed. The smell of smoke lingers, faint but kind, clinging to the walls like memory refusing to leave. Somewhere far away, a donkey brays once, then gives up, content to let silence do the talking. You walk through the village slowly. The sand feels cooler now, pressing gently against your feet, and the air smells faintly of ash and barley. Each house hums with the rhythm of sleep, the whisper of someone turning on a mat, the soft breath of a child, the distant cough of an old man still awake. That mattered because even rest was earned here. The world feels delicate, like parchment too thin to fold, and you move carefully, afraid to disturb the balance. The stars reflect on the Nile, flickering like 1,000 oil lamps left behind by gods who forgot to clean up after creation. You listen to the water's murmur, endless, gentle, repetitive. It tells no stories, yet somehow explains everything. That mattered because silence, when patient enough, becomes language. You close your eyes, breathing with the river's rhythm, and feel the night filling the spaces between your thoughts. You pass a doorway where a clay pot still steams faintly. The smell of lentils and garlic lingers, heavy with comfort. You imagine the hands that stirred it earlier, tired, cracked, steady. That scent, you realize, is older than pyramids. It's the perfume of survival, ordinary and eternal. You breathe it in slowly, letting it rest inside your chest. The air tastes warm, human, safe. A dog curls near the hearth, tail twitching in dreams. You hear its soft snore, a sound that feels like gratitude in motion. The fire pops once, and the ember glow dances over the wall, illuminating a jar of grain, a few onions, a folded mat. The inventory of an entire life fits into one small room. That mattered because simplicity is the most honest kind of wealth. You stand there quietly, half smiling, letting the room's peace seep into your bones. The night deepens, the temperature falls, and the wind carries whispers from far fields. Rustling reeds, distant frogs, the occasional splash of something unseen. You can almost feel the planet breathing beneath you, slow and immense. The sound is hypnotic, ancient, patient. You wonder how many centuries it has taken humanity to learn this rhythm and how easily we forget it each morning. A soft drizzle begins, almost invisible. The drops kiss the sand, the rooftops, the sleeping faces. You feel one land on your arm, cool as mercy. Rain is rare here, but when it comes, everything pauses. Even the river seems to listen. That mattered because scarcity teaches reverence. You close your eyes and let the feeling linger, the scent of wet dust rising like incense from the earth. You find a place near the river and sit down, legs folded, hands resting on your knees. The moonlight pools around you like milk poured too slowly. In the distance, a single torch flickers near the temple, keeping watch. You watch it sway in the wind, and for a moment it feels alive, like a heartbeat reminding the world to continue. You breathe deeply, matching its pulse. Somewhere behind you, a lullaby drifts through the air, soft, wavering, sung by a mother you'll never see. The melody carries easily through the night, bouncing off mud brick walls and fields of grain. You don't know the words, but you know the meaning. It's the same in every language. You're safe now. The sound blurs into the wind until it's indistinguishable from prayer. You lie back on the ground, the sky enormous above you. The stars look close enough to touch, but you don't reach. You're tired in the best way, the kind that doesn't ache, only exhales. You listen to the hum of the world, the slow conversation between fire, water, and air. It's all saying the same thing. Rest, for now. Egypt sleeps. And for the first time tonight, so do you. You drift into sleep, and the world blurs into color and scent. The first thing you feel is warmth, not from sun or fire, but from memory itself. You're walking through fields of gold, the wheat tall and whispering. Each stalk bends toward you as if greeting an old friend. The air smells sweet, almost like honey mixed with smoke. The sky glows the color of ripe fruit, and somewhere far off you hear laughter, soft, distant, unhurried. You reach out and touch the grain. It hums beneath your fingers, alive with stories. Every seed seems to remember a season, a hand, a prayer whispered into the soil. That mattered because food in Egypt wasn't grown, it was inherited. You close your eyes and feel the rhythm of harvest, the sickle's arc, the rustle of sheaves, the sigh of workers. The sound folds into your breathing, slow and circular. In your dream, the wheat begins to move. It ripples like water, waves of gold rolling toward the horizon. You follow the motion, barefoot, each step sinking softly into the earth. The soil is warm, forgiving, and smells faintly of rain long past. You realize you're walking through centuries, every footstep a year, every gust of wind another dynasty. That mattered because time here doesn't pass, it recycles. A figure appears ahead, a farmer, maybe, though his face is vague. He's humming the same lullaby you heard earlier, and in his hands he carries a loaf of bread glowing faintly, as if lit from within. He breaks it, offers you half. The crust is warm and the inside smells like home, even though you've never been here before. That mattered because dreams borrow familiarity when truth runs out. You take a bite, and it tastes like morning after rain. The world around you shifts. The field turns to a riverbank, the grain to reeds, the hum to quiet. You hear your own heartbeat echoing the river's pulse. The loaf in your hands crumbles into seeds that scatter into the water, drifting away like thoughts you don't need anymore. That mattered because nourishment doesn't end. It changes form. You feel lighter, not full, but balanced. You look down at the water and see faces reflected. Bakers, farmers, scribes, children, priests, everyone you've met tonight. Their expressions are calm, eyes half closed, as if they're listening to the same song only the Nile remembers. The current ripples, distorting them into shapes that blend and fade, that mattered because memory in Egypt was never still. It flowed like everything else. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of wet clay and crushed herbs. It brushes your face gently, almost human. You realize the land itself is dreaming with you, dreaming of all the hands that shaped it, all the mouths that blessed it, all the hunger that defined it. You breathe in and feel the centuries settle softly inside you. The world, for once, feels full. The farmer's figure fades, leaving behind only the sound of wings, cranes lifting from the reeds, their cries thin and beautiful. They rise into the sky, their white feathers catching sunlight you can't quite see. That mattered because even dreams need witnesses. You watch until they vanish into brightness, leaving you alone with the hush of the river. The ground beneath you trembles gently, like something enormous turning in its sleep. You open your eyes, still dreaming, maybe awake, and the horizon glows with morning. The smell of grain and smoke lingers faintly, tethering you between past and present. You feel calm, weightless. You know the story isn't ending, it's just breathing. You sit up slowly, stretch your fingers through the air, and smile. Somewhere behind you, the Nile sighs. Long, deep, forgiving. You whisper a thank you to no one in particular, and the wind carries it away. Egypt, generous as ever, answers with silence. The morning feels weightless, as if sound itself decided to rest. The sun rises slowly, soft and golden, brushing the horizon like a cautious hand. The temples stand silent now. No drums, no chants, just the echo of rituals that have already faded into air. You walk through the courtyard where offerings once steamed and buzzed with flies. The smell of incense is faint but loyal, clinging to the stones like the memory of faith that doesn't know it's over yet. The statues watch you, eyes wide and calm, carved to look patient but already forgotten. Their lips, painted red centuries ago, are cracked by time and heat. You trace your fingers over one, the sandstone warm, almost human. That mattered because gods here were built for weather, not eternity. Their silence doesn't feel cruel, just practical. They've said all they needed to, and the rest is up to the living. You exhale, and dust rises, slow and graceful. You find an old bowl in a corner, once filled with grain, now home to a spider's web. The threads catch sunlight like silver veins. You crouch to look closer and see that one grain remains inside, small, dry, impossibly ancient. That mattered because meaning rarely leaves loudly. It lingers quietly in corners. You smile to yourself, half amused, half reverent. The gods are gone, but their leftovers still perform miracles for spiders. A breeze drifts through the temple, carrying the smell of river water and crushed lotus. The sound is low, almost a hum, as if the building itself is remembering how to pray. You close your eyes and let it move through you, a soundless hymn that fills your lungs with warmth. That mattered because silence, when it's old enough, becomes sacred. You breathe slower, matching the rhythm of the wind, and the world begins to feel whole again. Outside, the sunlight hits the sand, turning it white and endless. You squint and see a farmer in the distance, bending to plant seeds. His figure is small, almost swallowed by light. The cycle has already begun again. Worship traded for work, temples for fields. That mattered because Egypt never truly believed in endings. The gods may have slept, but the people kept sowing. And maybe that was its own kind of prayer. You sit on the temple steps, watching him move in the shimmering heat. Every scoop of soil, every bent knee feels like faith reimagined, quieter, humbler, alive. You realize Egypt never lost its religion. It just changed its vocabulary. The river became a sermon, the harvest a hymn. That mattered because divinity, in the end, isn't about statues. It's about persistence. You feel yourself smiling again, softly, without reason. The air thickens with warmth, and the stones beneath you hold the heat like memory. You rest your palms on them, feeling the pulse of centuries underneath. It's faint, but it's there. The echo of footsteps, voices, laughter, prayers. That mattered because history doesn't disappear. It just learns how to whisper. You listen closely, and for a moment, it almost sounds like gratitude. You look up at the sky, impossibly blue, cloudless, vast. Somewhere above, birds circle lazily, their wings flashing silver against the light. They look weightless, free of both faith and hunger. You envy them for a second, then laugh quietly. The gods might have envied them too. That mattered because everything living eventually learns to worship simplicity. The sun presses against your skin like approval. The air smells of hot stone and faint smoke. You take one last look at the temple, the carvings, the shadows, the silence. You realize it doesn't feel abandoned at all. It feels content. The gods aren't gone, they're resting, finally full. And maybe, for once, so are you. You turn toward the river, the sound of its slow breathing reaching you again. You walk toward it, each step light, unhurried. Behind you, the temple fades into shimmer, swallowed by sunlight. Ahead, the water glows gold, the surface calm and endless. The world, for now, is enough. The sun leans low over the horizon now, painting the river bronze. The air is warm but gentle, like the day exhaling through your hair. You sit on the edge of a dune, watching the light ripple across the water, and the world feels full. Not rich, not perfect, just full. The smell of smoke, bread, and distant flowers hangs in the air, the scent of an empire that refused to starve, even when it had nothing left to prove. You break a small piece of bread between your fingers, stale, crumbling, still fragrant with ash. It smells faintly like every kitchen you've walked through tonight, every prayer whispered into the fire. You take a bite, slow and deliberate. The grit catches against your teeth, the taste flat but familiar. That mattered because imperfection is memory's flavor. You chew slowly, swallowing centuries, and the aftertaste is strangely peaceful. The wind shifts, carrying the murmur of reeds, the croak of frogs, the splash of something unseen. The Nile glows under the fading sun, reflecting both the day's labor and the promise of tomorrow's hunger. You breathe in deeply, and the air tastes like wet clay and sweetness. Life condensed into smell. That mattered because Egypt never truly rested. It just paused between meals. You close your eyes and picture the people who fed this land. The bakers, the brewers, the farmers, the mothers, the cooks of the dead. Their hands, their laughter, their curses. All of them still here, somewhere in the dust, somewhere in the taste of the air. You feel them like warmth beneath your ribs. That mattered because survival is the only real immortality. The first stars appear, faint and deliberate. You hear the faint creak of oars from a distant boat, its lantern a single dot of amber moving across the dark water. You imagine it carrying grain, or offerings, or maybe just two fishermen with nothing to prove. That mattered because stories never really end. They just drift quietly downstream. The river hums its low, endless song, and you find yourself breathing in sync. The night deepens and the desert cools. The sand beneath you feels soft, almost fluid, like time itself. You lie back and stare at the stars, which look closer than they should. The world above and below blur into the same gentle rhythm. Inhale, exhale, flood, drought, feast, famine, life, death, repeat. That mattered because eternity isn't a destination, it's a pattern. You let yourself sink into it, weightless. You open your hand and let the crumbs of bread fall into the sand. The wind takes them, scattering them into the dark. Somewhere, something small will eat them. Somewhere, someone will bake again. Egypt keeps feeding itself in circles, patient and precise. That mattered because no civilization truly dies if its hunger survives. You smile, eyes half closed, as the sound of the river folds around you. The moon rises over the horizon, pale and full, turning the Nile into silver silk. You can almost hear laughter drifting through the wind, the kind that lingers after dinner, soft and content. You feel sleep pressing against your shoulders, gentle and heavy. The air smells faintly of onions and lotus. You breathe once more, slow and deep, the taste of earth and time on your tongue. And then, with the night cradling you softly, you let go of the day, of hunger, of noise, of history. Egypt exhales with you, slow and warm. The river sighs. The stars blink. And somewhere between silence and dream, you finally understand. Food didn't suck in ancient Egypt. It was just honest, imperfect, necessary, beautiful, like every human who ever tried to stay alive. The wind drifts across the dunes, carrying your breath into the river's endless song. Everything smells like rest. Everything tastes like peace.